that we did was Portugal. Portugal is an absolute monarchy. It had a global trading post empire, which means that they had strategic outposts all around the Indian Ocean to help control trade. So one of the cultural changes in Portugal was that from their colonies, they brought over foods which led to a more diverse diet, which is better nutrition, which means increased population, greater wealth from these cash crops, and then they had the use of enslaved Africans.
They transformed maritime trade by taxing non-Portuguese ships. They took over the trade routes between Persia Gulf, North African coast, and Western India. They replaced Arab control of the trade for ivory, gold, and slaves. First to significantly search the Atlantic Ocean, the government invested in itself through grants to other explorers, and they both established posts in Brazil and Japan.
Social changes within Portugal was the use of indentured servants. These servants would come over to the colonies in exchange for work in order to pay off their debts. Another social change was chattel slaves.
Henry the Navigator gathered around scholars from all around the area, and they made the first ever modern map with all of their help, which allowed for them to trade easily, and they also traded slaves and went to the Americas and things like that. They had two main ship innovations. They had the Carac and the Caravel ships. They used these to transport goods, slaves, things like that, from one area to the next. They also took over the Indian Ocean trade because they had cannons on these ships, which allowed for them to tax every ship that was trading goods in that time period.
Alfonso V had a son, John II, who had a cousin, Manuel I, who had a son, John III, whose grandson was Sebastian I, whose great nephew was Henry I, who had a nephew, Anthony I, who was the nephew of Henry I, and then Philip I was his son, Philip II, and then he had a son, Philip III, who was the great-grandson of Manuel I, and then John IV had a son, Alfonso VI, who was the son of John IV, who had a son, Peter II, whose son was John V, and that's it.
Alright guys. Weirdest facts, alright? And we got a weird fact. You ready? Portugal. We're big on corks, okay? They've been making corks since 1209, right? And they're the largest cork producer in the world. And they were still producing mass amount of corks in the 1700s.